Let's look at the printing industry in Nigeria. As a critical player and someone who has been following the news over the years, I would like you to give us your take on your view about the evolution of printing in Nigeria and your assessment of that industry as far as the Nigerian space is concerned.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Femi. Printing is very critical for national development. When you talk about printing, you're talking about most time printing and publishing go together. If you talk about the print media, if you talk about books, they are all within the ecosystem of printing. So in terms of the development in printing, in particular, the evolution has been very challenging. Then in this era, we talk about digital printing and publishing. But before now, printing is an essential business, particularly for the education sector, the print media in particular. These are essential areas that have benefited from printing. So, but the evolution has been over time been steady, but then technology has changed the dynamics of when you talk about printing. So you're talking about 3Ds and new ecosystem in terms of the digital interface.
All right, good morning, Sam. Good to have you on Early Exchange this morning and see your face.
Good morning, Blessing. Good morning, Blessing. My pleasure.
Okay, looking at the printing industry in Nigeria, there are different segments. We have the commercial printing and security printing. The security segment deals with the printing of passports, national identity cards, banknotes, and others. From what we've experienced over the years, particularly with passport issues and the national identity cards, does it look like the security segment of that industry has the capacity? And if not, what kinds of skills development will build capacity for that sector?
I think there's politics in terms of the security printing to a very large extent. I think the players in that industry have always complained that the government, when it comes to security printing, do not give them so much opportunity, and that they have the capacity to a very large extent to do some of those printing, particularly security printing, that they are sourced to other agencies abroad. So I think internally we have the capacity, but then we have the political will to outsource this business to local businesses. That's a subject for another discussion.
All right, when it comes to the printing industry, I would like to have your take on the skills development. You discover most of the time to acquire the skills, they are being done in a very unconventional way or in an informal way. We don't have a lot of training institutes here when it comes to this issue of printing. And as a result, you have a shortfall when it comes to skill gap or skill development in Nigeria. What's your take on this, and how can this be addressed to ensure that the players in Nigeria can also compete with others around the world?
I think in terms of skill gap, the association of people who are into printing and publishing says that they have the required skill set to be able to unlock the potential in the business. But then in terms of how they are structured, in the way they do their business, the association has been able to galvanize them into one form. So they have requisite training. I do know that they have exchange, particularly with Germany, in terms of upscaling the skill set of those who do the technology back home in Nigeria. So those gap may be there, but then the association is making serious attempt to bridge the skill gap. But on the other hand, most manufacturers abroad that bring their technology to Nigeria always find a way to train those who we use the equipment or the machineries back in Nigeria. To that extent, over time, that gap that currently exists will be bridged. On the other hand, most of the people who are technically trained in that sector have learned that business over a period of time. So they have what you call a hands-on experience to be able to drive those processes.
All right, still looking at skills development, there are institutes, there are technical institutes, colleges that have courses on printing and packaging in Nigeria. But the curriculum is the issue. How do we come to the point where the curriculum is updated with modern trends in the industry?
In my view, the curriculum is well structured, particularly with the polytechnics. They have departments of art design, printing, and publishing. And the new development and new technology are also in the curriculum. What you might say is the number of people who get admitted into those departments so that you have a robust skill set that will be able to operate within the industry. That will be the conversation going forward. We have the curriculum that sustains that. I do know Yaba Tech, for example, Aoshi Polytechnic has a very robust printing and publishing department, including new technologies.
Right. Let's look at the issue of apprenticeship. You know, in this climb, there's this general apathy when it comes to the issue of apprenticeship. And this has so much affected the printing industry. What do you think could be done to help the plight of printers who need more hands? Because the issue of apprenticeship is fading. And right now, it's also contributing to the skill gap. So what can be done to correct this vacuum so that these can be, the industry can be better for it?
Femi, I think in terms of apprenticeship, the printing sector is one sector where you have a lot of apprenticeship training in terms of technical skill training. If you see the printing hub in Lagos, particularly area where you call Pangrove, you have a lot of people that are trained in terms of apprenticeship and who are able to sustain that industry. In terms of apprenticeship for that sector, I think it's well enabled to be able to take care of the technical skill set that you require to grow that industry. Maybe what you should be saying, what kind of training do they have for this apprenticeship in terms of new technology? I think that will be the conversation that the Association of Printers can look into with a view to advancing key competencies in terms of new technology for apprenticeship training in that sector.
So let's move on to research now, because research and development is very crucial for every industry. Now, looking at the printing and the packaging industry, how can the research institutes collaborate with the industries to ensure that whatever research that they come up with in terms of innovation for materials and even the processes, there is a seamless integration, and that translates into the trend by which they now operate, reducing costs and becoming more efficient?
Thank you very much indeed, Blessing. I think there should be more collaboration between TAN and GAN. You have various universities of technology that have printing and publishing departments. So the industry should relate more with the universities and the polytechnics so that they can draw on the research and development that they have in the university so that they become more impactful in the industry, so that you're able to sustain a growth in that industry. You're able to catch up with new technologies that come from abroad, and the skill, you're able to upscale those skill sets that will be able to sustain the industry, as I mentioned earlier. Research and development is key to any industry, and I do know there are lots of body of knowledge in terms of research and learning within the printing ecosystem that the practitioners in the industry can rely on. Then we equally encourage the researchers from research institutions, universities, and polytechnics to find a way how they can put their research available to the sector so that we can grow that sector and catch up with the rest of the world.
All right, now let's look at the plight of printers in Nigeria, those who are into printer business. Just like every business in Nigeria, you have the issue of cost of doing businesses in Nigeria. I'd like you to paint a picture of what these printers go through when it comes to the cost of doing businesses in Nigeria, knowing fully well that you have digital printing to be the order of the day, the issue of technology, but the issue of power is also another challenge. Talk to us or paint a picture of what an average printer in Nigeria goes through when it comes to doing businesses.
The challenge is generally the ease of doing business. One of the major challenges is the foreign exchange regime of plants and machineries, then input into the printing industry. We missed it. We had a development plan that took cognizance of how we can convert wood to paper in Nigeria to sustain that industry. But regrettably, the Wopin mill and the one in Akwa Ibom did not see the light of day. So most of the inputs are imported, which makes the cost of printing very expensive. On the other hand, in terms of new technology, the way you are able to bring those equipment are equally expensive. Therefore, it boils on the federal government to rethink that industry by finding a way to kickstart the paper rolling mills that will help to build that ecosystem to sustain that industry. But then the challenge is to what extent can government provide some window for those in the industry so that they can get some waivers in terms of what they pay for import, because printing essentially is very critical when you talk about printing for books and other educational materials that will help us to improve on our learning and development system.
All right, when we look at the printing industry in Nigeria, a lot of commercial printing is still being done in Lagos compared to other parts of the country. So that seems to imply that when it comes to printing skills, maybe Lagos is seen as the hub for Nigeria. But how can we leverage technology for accessible and even affordable training for a wider for the wider country, so that more persons can have access to these skills and even the technology being used?
I think Lagos is just taking advantage of what you call economic of scale. It's closer to the port, but nevertheless, you have other people that equally do printing outside Lagos. That industry is well established across Nigeria. But then technology is critical. So they need to do more investment in terms of how they can adopt new technology, bring new technology to the printing environment to sustain their business system. And with technology, I think the cost of printing over time will be reduced drastically. And that the university, on the other hand, who train the manpower that sustain that industry, must equally train people in new technologies so that that industry is sustained over a period of time.
Now let's look at the impact of internet or technology on printing. In the past you used to have just more of hard copies when it comes to printing of books. But now e-copies, are in vogue. People prefer the e-copies to the hard copy. Do you think this will invariably have had any impact on printing in Nigeria, or will you assume a time will come or an era will come where printing will be out of business?
No, printing is very critical to every sector. I don't think printing will be out of business. What I think is that technology will shape the way printing is done. You just talked about e-printing. That is in the ecosystem already. That will be in a sustainable manner. But to a very large extent, I'm not too sure that hard copies will be taken out of the system completely. There are some areas that you still need the hard copy, and even you can translate hard copy into e-copy. So we need to strike a balance between technology in terms of what you do through e-copy, then you equally have hard copy. So that balance will be there for a very long time. Even in the advanced society, you see have a lot of hard copy versus e-copy. And even when you talk about e-governance, e-government, and digital transformation, there's a relationship between the hard and the printing arena. So what we should talk about is that to what extent can we imbibe the printing as a nation where a lot of people have not adopted new technology. So those are the conversations that we must sustain so that the practice in that industry is enhanced.
All right, let's visit the aspects of or the segment of security printing again. I look at it. So you talked about political will, but apart from political will, what other factors do you think challenge that sector? Can we have more entrants into that sector?
Yeah, I think in addition to the political will to outsource business to local printer is the issue of corruption and the trust deficit. They feel that when you take security printing material like passport, checks, and other financial instruments, you outsource them to foreign company, you're able to reduce fraud. But I think that is not true. What you do is to develop your own industry, find a way to sustain the learning and the capacity building that can sustain that industry. And I recall the chairman of the Printer Association sometime early in this year saying that some of the businesses that are sourced, particularly from the printing and minting company, can be given to Nigeria, and that they have the capacity, they have the technical competencies and the human resource to drive that process. So the government, who is a major player in the security printing, must find a way to give business to the local printer to be able to scale up the competencies in that sector, and we're able to save some foreign exchange, and again, develop local capacity and create a way to sustain employment for the teeming Nigerian people who are in that industry.
All right. What will be your recommendations on what can be done to help the plight of players or the business owners in this sector? Over the years, you've seen the evolution that has taken place in that sector. But compared to other climes, there's a need for them to up their game, to upscale in terms of standardization and to professionalize their operations. What kind of recommendations can you make for them, for the federal government to come to their assistance? In what way, and what would be the impact of that?
The first one is they already have an association that engage with the government. They currently have a certification process that enables certain people to come to the industry. Once you're not satisfied, you're not able to do business. That's on the one hand. On the other hand, there should be more collaboration and partnership between TAN and GAN. That means within institutions, so that research and development can impact in terms of practice. Then government should find a way to patronize the sector through the association. Those three relationship will help to grow that sector for national development.
Talking about national development, often government looks at ways it can increase human capital development. If it were to look at the printing industry, how would this happen? How do you think this should happen? Should it go the route of the regular apprenticeship system that we have? What would be your recommendation in that aspect?
The apprenticeship system is well entrenched, which is good. They have the technical competence based on hands-on experience, training. Two, the universities and polytechnics must find a way to produce more people, attract more people into those departments so that we have a knowledge skill that we trickle down to those apprenticeships. Then government too must find a way to open the system so that the ease of doing business in that sector is encouraged. Then there must be a tax incentive that encourage investment, particularly foreign investment in that industry.
All right, let's look at the issue of paper importation in Nigeria. As a stakeholder, does it bother you that the bulk of papers in Nigeria are being imported when you have the local mills that should take care of that? So what's your take on this development?
Like I mentioned earlier, it's important that that industry, particularly converting wood to paper, you have two big industries that the federal government invested in that are in comatose. So the new government or the new administration should find a way to have foreign investors to invest in that industry with a view to developing that sector. There are other areas where you can derive inputs for printing. So there needs to be an investment, a deliberate investment by the government to sustain how we can convert wood to paper. Other derivatives that can be used for paper must be looked into. Then new technologies, as we mentioned earlier, must equally find a way to get into the system. So more investment, more internal development in terms of how we can improve on the processes and the inputs that sustain that industry. So it's worrisome that we still have over 19% of import in that industry. That, in my view, is not encouraging. We should find a way to reduce this only when you have just 50% of technical input to that industry so that we're able to retain foreign exchange and equally develop that industry so that we can compete favorably with other sectors.
Apart from looking at how these materials that are used for printing can be sourced locally, what about the aspect of recycling? Some of the materials are recyclable, for instance, paper. Isn't it time to look at that direction?
Yeah, that was the point I made earlier when I mentioned the word derivatives. There are a lot of things that can be recycled, but then you need the technology, you need the investment, you need the training to be able to enhance that subsector that will impact positively on the printing industry at large. So, and that's why I mentioned that there must be a relationship between the TAN and GAN, between research institutions, universities, polytechnics, to take advantage of these new technologies that can enhance the industry.